Hello everyone, welcome to Sawtember, welcome to YK Reviews. We're continuing the Saw retrospective reviews. We're moving on to Saw 6 now, so let's get straight into it here. Now, with the previous movie, Saw 5, I mentioned it in the review, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I felt like it was one of the weakest in the franchise. And with this one, it is a bit more of an improvement compared to Saw 5, but still not as like the peak Saw as it was in like the first couple of movies, but it's still entertaining nonetheless. So before we dive into the movie itself, if you do like these retrospective reviews, if you've seen the previous reviews, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button so that you're not missing out on these. We're going to be doing a tier ranking for all the Saw movies, come sawx, so definitely subscribe so that you're not missing out on that. But when it comes to this movie, it starts off as it usually does with like a trap, somebody inside a trap. And with this one, in this case, it's two lone people, I believe it was, where they're across like a cage from one another and they have to put body parts in a weight before the timer runs out. And when the timer does run out, the one that has like the most weight in the scale survives while the other one ends up dying with like these screws, I believe, just screwing their head in. So you've got this woman and you've got this guy, and this guy decides, because he's a bit on the bigger side of things here, he decides to cut up a piece of stomach fat, let's say. And honestly, I would have done the same thing. I don't blame him for that. But the woman, honestly, I've never seen anything like it, just decides to just cut her own arm off. And the way she did it, with the screaming, with the music, with the score, is one of the most insane opening sequence I've seen from Saw. So she ends up cutting her own arm off. That balances the scale in terms of her favor. So the guy ends up dying, which concludes the opening sequence of the Saw movie for Saw 6 here. Okay, now when it comes to, again, the Saw movies, you always have like the people inside this game room getting tested by Jigsaw, and then you've got like the main characters. So as usual with these retrospective reviews, I want to start off with the people that are playing the games first, just because the main characters that we're following, there's always twists and turns going on here. But when it comes to the game itself, you're following the CEO guy for the insurance companies. You would get a little bit of flashbacks in terms of like his policies, like how they have this formula of working out how to deny people. There's this flashback scenes of him denying this person. Honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head what's going on with him, but he essentially is giving the guy a death wish. So you see this guy leaving the room. So you've got flashbacks of him meeting with Johnkramer as well, in terms of like the new test treatments for his cancer, and that he's not getting like the approval from these people because it's like new trials and stuff like that. And with the previous person, the flashback I just remembered now is that because he had this surgery on his jaw or his gums and he had like this heart disease, so essentially because of that they're denying that claim. And we also come to find out that with the CEO guy is that he actually has this dedicated team that always finds little things to deny people their claims, so kind of like a scumbaggy CEO person. So he is essentially being tested with the Saw games. So he's in his office, the famous pig from all the previous movies comes in, attacks him, drugs him up. He ends up waking up being strapped and sees the cleaner, I believe it was, across from him. And with this new little twist here is that they're strapped to these contraptions, and the more you breathe, the more like this screws are like digging into you here. So if you're breathing, then you basically end up dying. So you have to like hold your breath. So the cleaner guy isn't able to do that. He ends up dying. And the CEO guy basically begins his test. It's similar to the movie. It's similar to Jeff from Saw 3. He is being tested, every room is being tested. And also we get to see this woman and her son, we're presuming it's his wife and his son, watching on screen everything taking place. While in another room you've got this reporter who appeared in like a previous couple of movies, and she's also in the next room. She's being caged up, watching everything taking place as well. And so he goes into the next test. The next test is that there's two people, his secretary and the filing guy, I believe it was, like a young guy. So he's pulling on these like ropes thingy. I'm not sure exactly what you're calling them here. So he's holding on, one hand is the guy, one hand is his secretary. He's pulling on them. If he has to let go of one to save the other one. So you've got this single guy, young guy that nobody cares about, according to Jigsaw. And then you've got this woman who's a secretary. She's not got long to live anyway, but she's got a family. He has to let go of one. He ends up letting go of the young guy that nobody cares about in order to save the secretary, the older woman. But the way they played that out when you have the guy, he gets hung, but then he just swings and smacks into the glass, which I really shouldn't laugh, but I just found that hilarious. And then he goes into the third test, which is he's guiding the lawyer. I believe it was the lawyer for the company or his personal lawyer. So he's in the upper level, she's in the bottom level. She can't see anything. He has to, I believe, like pull some lever or do something where this steam is coming from, and in order for her to go across the corridors, across the hallways, he has to pull on it so the steam goes into him rather than her. And then we come to find out that the key for her so that she can escape is actually inside the CEO guy. So she's trying to cut him up. He ends up avoiding this. He ends up, I believe, beating her up, punching her, and she ends up dying because she doesn't make it in time. So then you've got the cleaner of the company, you've got the filing guy of the company, and you've got the lawyer now, all dead because of these tests here and because of him failing to do these tests. And so he gets to the next room, which honestly is one of my favorite scenes of the movie, is you've got this little like roundabout carousel where as soon as it stops, there's this shotgun which will shoot you, and so he has to put his arm in to make sure that he stops the shotgun, but he only gets to save 2 people out of 6, I believe it was. It wasn't even the trap itself, it was the characters and the people there, because like once you go around and you have these people get shot, they're just like screaming how one is pregnant, one has a family, just making up all this bullshit in order to save themselves. And just there's this one guy, the last person that does get shot, who's just exposing people left, right and center, exposing people that aren't pregnant, exposing people that don't have families, just calling out everybody, and just everybody just turning on each other in order to save themselves. So it was the characters themselves that really made this scene, and also like the tension building, because every time somebody stops at the carousel and the gun is pointing at them, you just feel this tension. Will he save them? Will he not save them? So it was some really great tension building, but also some entertaining lines thrown in there with these characters. So I have to give praise to that particular scene. And then we get to the last part of the test, the games here being played. So it comes to find out that the wife and son who was watching the whole thing isn't actually his wife and son. It was actually the dad that they showed the flashback of, where they denied the claim because of the surgery on his jaw and heart disease stuff. So it was their husband father that he denied. And then in the other room, it was this journalist who again appeared in previous movies, was his sister. So the real question was, is that will this family let him live, or will they kill him? Because this lever shows live or die. The son, which honestly I would have done the same thing, pulls down the die option, and this contraption comes through and like stabs him in the back, releasing all this hydrochloric fluid, I believe it was called, all into him, just killing him off. And honestly, when it comes to the whole situation here, like I feel like the traps in themselves, other than the whole carousel one, like they were kind of a bit on the lackluster side. Like if you're comparing his test versus Jeff's test in Saw 3, you like those ones were good tests. Those ones really tested like your psychological mindset, your willpower, and really gave you that conflict to believe in. While this one, it was sort of like I mentioned, you have like him guiding somebody in this room, you have somebody holding their breath, you have him pulling on these ropes to save one or the other. So just not really great traps or great tests versus like other movies. And even like towards the end too, like while I do enjoy that, like that contraption swinging onto his back, the reporter who was in the previous 2 movies, I thought she would have more of an impact in the movie, but she was kind of just sidelined. She's investigating Jigsaw only to be this side character that's the sister watching her brother die. So it just kind of felt really flat and not really have much of an impact in terms of the movie in itself. While you understand why he's part of this, because of like his dodgy policies and how he's denying insurance left, right and center, especially denying Johnkramer, I felt like it could have just been handled a lot better, and the traps could have just been a lot more creative rather than the ones that we were set out to play with. But we move on to like the main characters like Hoffman and that kind of stuff. So Hoffman, after the events of the previous movie, we end up seeing like Strom's body just hanging there. We go to the FBI guy who arrives at the scene of the crime, which was taking place for the first opening scene with the insurance people. Hoffman is also there. Then we get the surprise return of Agent Perez from Saw 4, Strom's partner, and Hoffman is quite shocked about this. So they have to work together to try and find Jigsaw, because Jigsaw took a piece out of that chunky guy's stomach as part of like the whole test thingy. And with this, I feel like this was a more interesting part of the movie, because we see the 2 of them working together. They actually come to find out that the pieces that was cut from Jigsaw was a lot different in terms of like the knife structure versus like the previous victims that have done it. And they also look for an old recording to try and debunk the recording to try and get the original voice here. So as the movie's progressing, you're getting like these agents moving closer and closer to finding out about Hoffman. You can see not the fear or the panic in his eyes, but the way his mind is working and how he's able to try and overcome this. So as they're moving closer, they go into the FBI office where they're descrambling the voice, and once that voice revealed to show Hoffman, so you've got Hoffman with a quick thinking, and this is why for me he is a great character, especially in this movie, and his quick wit. He ends up cutting the FBI Erickson's throat. He ends up throwing coffee at Agent Perez. He grabs the lady that was debunking the voice, and Perez ends up shooting this lady because the room is all dark now and she can't see because of the coffee, and then he ends up stabbing Agent Perez, so burning everything, clearing up the mess so that nobody does suspect him. And then he ends up going towards the warehouse area part of where the events were taking place with the game itself. Now as we're moving towards the third act, we also get Jill, who is John Kramer's ex-wife. She's part of the movie here. In the previous movie, she received a box from John Kramer after his death. And so long story short, when it comes to her character, she basically has these envelopes which she gives to Hoffman earlier in the movie, which is where they determined who the people are in part of the trap. But we also see a bit of flashback. So we come to find out actually that the reason why Cecile, the guy that triggered John Kramer and started all of this, he was actually doing this on behalf of Amanda, which I honestly wasn't a huge fan of, the fact that it was Amanda pushing him to go to the clinic to get these drugs and stuff like that, and then he's the one that ran out and like pushed the door to kill her. Like I wasn't a huge fan of having Amanda being involved in this, but that's the reason why she was like freaking out and crying the ending of Saw 3, because the letter that she was reading was actually from Hoffman saying that he knows she was involved and that he'll tell John Kramer if she doesn't kill Dr. Lin, so setting off these chain of motions. Again, not a huge fan of all of that. But we get little flashbacks of also Amanda and Hoffman working together. Amanda trying to like poke the bear with Hoffman. So we get like a lot of like, I wouldn't say retcon or anything like that, but just adding more depths and more layers with these characters, which not a bad thing, but it's just adding and involving all of this stuff, like the events taking place in the earlier movies happening because of Hoffman or Amanda or that kind of stuff, rather than it just being all about John Kramer. I feel like it was just going around too much. But then as the third act, as we're getting close to the end of the movie, we see Jill was in the same warehouse with Hoffman. Hoffman is like reading a letter that Jill actually put in the location. He sits down, she gets this button and electrocutes a chair and ends up tying him, where she puts that bear trap, the same bear trap that was on Amanda in the first movie, and how she like escaped for the first time and like managed to save herself. So Jill puts this on Hoffman's head, and then as the movie is ending, you see him smashing his head through the glass window of the door, managing to escape, slicing open a side of his face, but he manages to save his life. So that concluding the movie. So as I mentioned, an improvement upon the previous movie. May not have been the greatest in terms of the whole franchise so far, traps wise, Saw game wise, not as strong as it could have been, but definitely an improvement nonetheless. When it comes to like the previous movie, the characters and the storyline was a lot more interesting rather than playing this cat and mouse game. Hoffman was a great standout and really shined in this movie, but I still feel like it did have its flaws. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below if you have seen Scream 6, what your thoughts are about it. Did you enjoy it? Were you a fan of it? What your thoughts are about the traps too? Let me know in the comment section down below. But that about wraps it up for Saw 6. We're concluding the original trilogy of movies with the upcoming one, Saw 3D or Saw 7 or Saw the Final Chapter, whatever you want to call it. So definitely subscribe, don't miss out on those reviews along with the tier ranking. But I thank you so much for watching and thank you so much for listening. This is YK Reviews. Peace.